Have you ever felt like we're living in an age of just profound uncertainty? Well, what if that's not a bug, but a feature? Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating theological framework that looks at our modern era as this deliberate waiting period, like we're in a pause, right before a massive world-altering event that's been prophesied. Okay, so let's start with this quote from our source material, because it really just cuts right to the heart of everything. Since historical truth died, we live in an al-fatra, an age between prophets. Wow. I mean, that suggests we're kind of lost in this spiritual and intellectual fog, right? A time where that clear divine guidance has, well, it's faded. So that leaves us with a big question. What does it actually mean to be in an age between prophets? And maybe more importantly, how in the world do we find our way through it? All right, so here's how we're going to tackle that. First, we'll break down exactly what this age between prophets is. Then we'll get into the BioIslam framework, which is presented as a kind of modern toolkit for our times. After that, we'll look ahead to this awaited return. And we'll wrap up by getting practical. What do we do right now in the middle of all this ambiguity? So let's dive right into part one, an age between prophets. We need to really get a handle on what this framework sees as the core challenge of our time. Okay, so the central idea here is this term al-fatra. Think of it as an era of just deep ambiguity. It's not that people don't have faith, not at all. It's more that the absolute clarity you get when a prophet is physically present, that's gone. And it leaves the rest of us to grapple with interpretation and all this uncertainty. And this isn't just some abstract spiritual challenge. It's a massive intellectual one too. The source material calls it profound analytical ambiguity. And you can feel that, right? Think about it. Conflicting historical accounts, a million different interpretations of scripture, and just the sheer noise of information we're bombarded with every single day. Trying to find something that feels like ultimate certain truth in all that, it's incredibly difficult. And that's the exact problem this framework is designed to tackle. So, if the problem is this massive ambiguity, what's the solution? Or at least, what's the method for navigating it? Well, this is where the concept of BioIslam enters the picture. It's offered up as a very specific toolkit for this in-between age we find ourselves in. BioIslam isn't presented as some new religion, but more as a theological framework. And it really stands on three pillars. First, a deep reverence for the whole prophetic tradition. Second, a very real, future-focused hope in the return of Isa/Jesus. And third, and this is what makes it so unique, is its commitment to integrating faith with what it calls open reason and the empirical findings of science. In this view, scientific discovery isn't separate from faith. It's actually seen as a form of divine self-disclosure, God revealing truths through the natural world. So what you have here is a very active methodology. This isn't about just sitting back and passively waiting for something to happen. No, it's a dynamic approach. You honor the entire prophetic line, from Adam all the way to Muhammad, while at the same time, you're actively preparing for the return of Isa/Jesus. And the crucial part is what you do in the meantime. You use two essential tools, the empirical power of science and the intellectual rigor of open reason. And it's important to note, the sources for this explainer really emphasize that this path isn't just modern conjecture. It's grounded in solid, researched interpretations of theological texts. Okay, so this naturally brings us to the end game. If we're living in this age of ambiguity, does it ever end? And if so, how? Well, according to this framework, the answer is a resounding yes. And it lies in a prophesied event that is absolutely central to this entire perspective. The term for this event is Nuzul Isa. It literally means the descent of Isa/Jesus. And let's be clear, according to this framework, this is not a metaphor. It's understood as a real, future, miraculous, physical event that will bring the al-fatra, that age of ambiguity, to a definitive end. His return is the moment when that fog we've been talking about finally, completely lifts. So, what's his purpose? Why does he return? The source material is very specific about this. The returning Isa, Jesus, the Al-Messiah or Messiah, he's not just some symbolic figurehead. His prophesied role is to be the ultimate arbiter. His job is to, and I'm quoting, clarify conundrums. Think of all the theological debates, all the historical disagreements that have defined our age of ambiguity. His return is meant to resolve all of it, providing one single, crystal clear interpretation of the divine will. Now, it's really important to put this belief into context. A firm belief in a physical Nuzul Isa is something the BioIslam framework shares with the scholars of traditional Islam, both Sunni and Shia. The source does note that this belief has kind of been downplayed in more recent times because of various modern pressures. But it's not a universal belief across the entire Muslim world. For example, you have groups like Quranists or the Ahmadiyya who interpret the scriptures differently and don't believe in a physical return. And this disagreement, this variety of interpretations, kind of perfectly highlights the very ambiguity that Isa's return is said to resolve. This all leads to a really fascinating and, let's be honest, a thoroughly modern question. I mean, think about it. In our world of deep fakes, incredible CGI, and who knows what other advanced tech is coming, how would we know? How could we possibly verify that such a monumental event was the real deal? What's cool is that the framework totally anticipates the skepticism and even has a name for it, the fake alert scenario. So how do you handle the fake alert scenario? Well, it proposes this really interesting litmus test. Step 1 is the obvious question. Can this person perform genuine miracles? But here's the brilliant catch. A true miracle isn't just something amazing. It has to be something that defies our most advanced, cutting-edge understanding of physics. So the argument is that our own scientific progress actually becomes our best defense against being duped. The more we learn about how the universe works, the harder we are to fool. And this idea is just perfectly captured by Arthur C. Clarke's famous third law. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This is so central to the whole modern challenge of prophecy, isn't it? Something that would have been an undeniable, jaw-dropping miracle centuries ago might be explainable with technology today or tomorrow. So that litmus test for what counts as a real miracle? It's a moving target. It has to evolve right alongside our own scientific knowledge. Okay, so we've got this incredible future promise. But what about us, right here, right now? Where does that leave us? For our final section, let's explore the practical and philosophical advice for actually living in this al-Halthetra while we await that ultimate clarity. The framework describes living in this time as a joint jihad. Now, I know that word can be really loaded and misunderstood, but in its proper theological context, it simply means to struggle or to strive. And here, it's a call for an active struggle on two fronts at the same time. There's the internal, spiritual struggle for your own faith, and then there's the external, intellectual struggle to make sense of the world and the divine message, using all the tools you have, like reason and evidence. And that really defines our task. The source calls our time a trans-historical liminal space, which is a fancy way of saying we're on the threshold, standing in the doorway between two completely different eras. And what are the recommended tools to navigate this space? Reason and the empirical strength of the pro-science cath. So, for instance, instead of seeing something like the Big Bang as a challenge to faith, this framework would say, no, that's a scientific description of the divine act of creation. It's God revealing truth through data. It's about embracing science as a vital tool to navigate reality while we wait for the kind of clarity that only a prophet can deliver. And that brings us to the real heart of this whole framework. The ultimate goal isn't to have all the answers right now. In fact, in an Ahl al-Fatra, that's considered impossible. The real goal is to become a talib al-haq, a true, sincere seeker of truth. And that's not easy. It requires real intellectual humility. It requires being ready to update your convictions when new knowledge comes along, especially, as the source points out, when those truths are revealed through the findings of science. So it leaves us with one last, really challenging question to ponder. In an age that's defined by the struggle for truth, are we willing to become its most sincere seekers?